Powell, do you want me to go ahead and share my screen or not yet?
I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction, so then maybe after that.
Okay, great. My favorite little Terps cup here. I don't know if you can see it. My favorite Terps cup here.
I love that.
I thought that was appropriate for tonight.
Very in theme. I like it. Mine is not so festive.
Wow, we've got 50 people already with us. That's amazing.
Everyone has been very, very excited for tonight. So
good.
I think we have 50 people here. I'm going to go ahead and get started and keep adding anyone in as they come in. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to Career Week. My name is Powell. We are so excited that you are all able to join us for today's webinar on how to write a winning resume. This webinar is brought to you by the Alumni Association's Career Week and the Howard County Alumni Network. Career Week is a week-long virtual event series to help alumni like you conquer, steer, and advance your career. This webinar will be recorded. By participating, you acknowledge and consent to your image, likeness, or voice being recorded. For those of you who plan to use closed captioning, please click the CC button on the bottom of your Zoom panel. We have a lot of information to cover today, but we will take questions at the end of the webinar. Please feel free to submit any questions along the way in the chat box, and I will be monitoring them and will intermingle them throughout and save some for the end. Now, a little bit about our presenter today. Susan Chong Powell has over 24 years of experience in human resources with an emphasis in college recruiting. Prior to becoming an instructor at the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland, College Park. In 2010, she was a regional campus relations manager for Lockheed Martin, responsible for the recruiting, relationship development, philanthropic giving, and technical R&D activities of Lockheed Martin on multiple campuses along the East Coast for more than a decade. Susan, I will let you take it away from here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Powell. I am so pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Powell. I really appreciate it. There's actually a nice networking example in this seminar tonight because Powell was actually one of my former students. And so she reached out to me, and because I knew her and respected her, I absolutely accepted her invitation. And so, you know, keep those college networking relationships going, and you never know where they might lead in really positive ways. So, and believe me, I will definitely lean on Powell, you know, for other professional things that I need her help with. And so it's a nice opportunity to build that network. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, Powell, give me a thumbs up if you can see that.
Yep, we're good.
Yep, awesome. Okay, all right. So as Powell said, my name is Susan Chong Powell. I am currently an instructor at the University of Maryland College Park in this Robert H. Smith School of Business. I just started classes on Monday, and with a new crop of freshmen. It's really exciting to be back on campus, which is always a good thing. We don't know what the environment will bring us to. You know, I did teach virtually, you know, for 3 semesters, you know, as many of you experienced as well. Either with your own children or yourself if you were still in school, or, you know, people you knew. And it was a very challenging environment. And we're going to talk a little bit about how, you know, this pandemic, which is still going on, has affected recruiting and the job place as well. One of the things that it has definitely affected is, you know, right here on Zoom, you know, people having to become familiar with technology that, you know, you may never have had reason to be around before. But in the remote world, there are, you know, a couple of things that you can do to set yourself apart, set yourself above, and really distinguish yourself from your peer group or from your competition. And those are things I want to share with you today. Okay, as Powell said, please drop any, you know, questions in the chat. She's going to be monitoring that. If it's a pertinent topic, she'll bring it up immediately. If not, she's going to save it for the end, where we'll have kind of an open Q&A. Okay. All right. So a real quick reminder, because I know not everybody here is from the School of Business. I know you might be from different areas. I am also a TERP alum. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but I'm a TERP alum as well, but not of the Smith School of Business, from the Department of English. And so, there were many business concepts that I had never been exposed to. And this is one that I used in my class right off the bat, Marketing 101. And many people on this call probably are Smith business grads, but even if you're not, you're a consumer. So hopefully these will be familiar to you. So the idea here is that if you want to market something, if you want to promote something, have it be in positive reputation amongst a group of people, what do you need to do? What do you need to know? The first thing is product attributes, whether it's a washing machine, whether it's a pair of sneakers, whether it's a car, or whether it's a candidate in the job search, which are all products. You need to know what those product attributes are in order to market it, in order to promote it, in order to convey to another party what the positive aspects of that product is. Whether you're talking about, let's say, shoes, sneakers, let's go, because I know there are people out there that are referred to as sneakerheads who are super into their, athletics type shoes. So what are the product attributes? What's the material? What's the price point? What's the color? What's the style? What's the athletic purpose? Is it more of a basketball shoe? Is it more of a running shoe? Is it a leisure shoe? Is it a tennis shoe? Is it a soccer style shoe? Those are all very different attributes of a shoe. They're still in the category of shoe. Car, there's a million different attributes of cars. And if you're going to promote it, you've got to know that product inside out, backwards, and upside down. So if you are the product in the job search process, you need to know in very great detail all the attributes you have to offer. Now, when I talk to people about this, just to students about this in the job search process, they're like, oh yeah, I know myself. But then when I start asking probing questions, they don't really know the right terms, or they don't really have a good grasp as to, all the different skills that they already possess, or the things that they don't possess that they need to go out and, acquire. And so knowing the product attributes is absolutely the first step. The second step is to consider consumer need. In the in the candidate process, the consumer is made up of two entities within a single employer. Two entities within a single employer. Those two entities are the recruiter, because that's typically the first entity that you'll encounter, whether that's a single recruiter or a department of recruiters or a team of recruiters. Because, for example, in Lockheed Martin, we definitely had a single recruiter responsible for the University of Maryland, but we also had a team, often of alums, who were very interested in recruiting from our specific campus. And so it might be more than one person. But typically they're the first persons that you need to impress, get through. It's not a hurdle in terms of something being adversarial, but it is definitely a step you need to get past before you will get in front of the second entity, which is the hiring manager. You can call it, supervisor, the decision maker, whatever you want to call it, but it's the hiring manager in the most generic terms. So again, two parties, the recruiter and then the hiring manager. Okay, they're the consumers. And you have to consider the fact that they have slightly different needs. They both want to select the most best fit, most, high potential, pleasant to work with employee, but the recruiter has a few more regulatory, if you will, or legal considerations that sometimes the hiring manager doesn't always think about. For example, affirmative action. For example, some of the legal terms and legal activities that the company has to fulfill in the recruiting process, especially in terms of documentation. So the recruiter might have some considerations, again, that the hiring manager doesn't think about. But the recruiter is the first person that you have to think about. So you have to craft your resume in particular to impress, I hate to use that word, but impress and, move the recruiter to action, meaning invite you in for the interview. Typically in the interview, you might be interviewed by the recruiter, but more often, in at least the second interview, maybe even the first, you'll be interviewed by the main stakeholder, which is the hiring manager. And again, this hiring manager might have very different, consumer needs than the recruiter. So think about that as well. And you really want to craft your messages, as in most any marketing thing, you want to craft your messages with the audience in mind. Not with what you care about, but what they care about. And we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail in a few slides. The third part is product differentiation. There's competition out there. There's a ton of competition out there. And it's not just the people on this call. It's not just the people in this room. With the virtual world and with databases, it's anybody. And it's not even just the people who've applied for the same job you've applied to. There's a huge, huge passive population that you are also in competition with. The passive job search process is where recruiters go out and mine candidates versus candidates coming out and applying for jobs. And so that is something that you really, really want to consider, that you're not just competing against the immediate applicants for the job, but also the passive workforce as well. Okay. So when we think about these three marketing concepts, the product attributes, the consumer need, and the product differentiation need to be top of mind. Yes, Powell.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I think that our screens aren't loading to your second page of the slideshow. We're still on job search tips.
Oh, you're kidding.
Mm-mm.
Let me go back and go forward again. Is it on Marketing 101 yet?
It's still on job search.
We're seeing the PowerPoint not in present mode.
I'm going to stop sharing and try again.
Sorry. It's good now.
Okay, I think you're right. I think I was sharing the PowerPoint, not the present mode. Thank you very much for whoever said that. Okay, so I apologize, but everything I was just saying was referring to this slide: product attributes, consumer need, and product differentiation. I hope I made that clear, even though you weren't seeing the slide. Sorry about that. Okay, let me see if I can get to the next slide from here. Okay, so again, these are the three keys. And oh, also, Powell, are the candidates, or excuse me, the participants on today's call going to be able to receive the slides, or do I need to go kind of slow?
They will be able to receive the link to the entire recording of the Zoom, so they'll be able to see the
slides. Oh, to the Zoom. Okay, got it. All right. So, so I don't need to send you the slide deck after the fact. Okay, great. It'll be recorded. Thank you. All right. So again, product attributes, consumer need, and product differentiation. Those are the marketing concepts that, again, carry through to the candidate process. All right. Powell, I'm going to ask you for your help. Would you read this out loud?
Yes. Passion, a noun, any powerful or compelling emotion or feeling.
The thing that I've seen the most successful in their career, executives, because I did some executive coaching as well in my career. The thing that I've seen kind of connect all of them is passion. If they are really passionate about the mission or about the products of the company that they represent, they are setting themselves up for a really long career. If it's just a job, not a career, not a passion, not an area that you truly feel really good about promoting, it's easy to, get a paycheck and be in that job for a little while, but it's not terribly sustainable. Those are the people that I see jump around a lot because they have not yet found their passion area. But once you find your passion area, whether that's a cause or whether that's a product or whether that's the people that your product helps or affects, those are the people that I see in careers very long term. And those are the people that I see, just really grow in their careers. So what I really encourage all the freshmen that I teach, and really everybody on this call as well, is if you're not already in an industry or a field, because it doesn't have to be your specific company, but the industry that you're in, that you're truly passionate about and that you truly feel good about supporting, then trying to find that, because that's the thread that I see, people who are very long in their careers and very successful, they tend to have that single thread throughout their job history, is that they're very passionate about what they do. Okay, Powell, could you read this one as well?
Mm-hmm. Talent, a special natural ability or aptitude, a capacity for achievement or success and ability.
Great. This is another thread that I see in very successful people later on in their careers, is that there is some area of talent that they possess, and everybody has a talent or a couple of talents. And, these are the things that you are just kind of naturally really good at. And being paid to do what you're really good at is a wonderful feeling, because you've got high competency, probably very high success, low stress, because again, you're good at it. Now, anybody can be taught to do anything at some level of competency, right? I may be terrible at music, which I am, terrible tone deaf. I could train, I could work my tush off, I could get really, really great instructors, and I could become some level of okay, some level of acceptable. But it would be a struggle. It would be hard. I would probably falter quite a bit. I probably would not get paid very well for it because I would be kind of mediocre. But if I go into an area that I am really good at, so let's say dance is an area that I'm really talented at, and I, again, get good instruction, put a lot of effort into it, I might be able to be, a prima ballerina in, a really high level dance corps. There are other people who could never dream of reaching that level of achievement in that particular area. So think about what area you are most talented in. Think about what people come to you for help with. Think about what you could kind of do in your sleep. Those are the areas of talent that are probably the ones that would be least stressful, but also most likely to bring you success because you already start with a base level of talent in it. And again, with effort, with putting in work, and also getting training and honing your skills, you might be able to develop that talent area into an area that you become a subject matter expert and highly valued to a corporation or to a customer base. This is an area that, again, that I see people shoehorn themselves in and really struggle and become really unhappy later on in their careers. These are people who, nothing against lawyers, but go to law school because their moms or dads tell them to. And they don't really have a passion for it. They don't really have necessarily a talent for it. They work really hard. And so they achieve a certain level of success, but they're not really happy. And again, you can say that in any field. You could say that about medicine or real estate or teaching or anything. Nothing against lawyers. But again, it's the ones that I see really embrace their talent are the people that I see really happy long-term. Okay. Powell, one more time.
Lifestyle, the habits, attitudes, tastes, moral standards, economic level, etc., that together constitute the mode of living of an individual or group.
Again, in my executive coaching, I have seen people absolutely forget this part. More so at the early parts of their career, less so at the more senior part of their career because they've realized the value of it or the importance of it. It seems like people at the early part of their careers are more willing to, diminish the importance of this aspect. And my suggestion is that you don't diminish it because, again, your life is why you work. You work to finance your life, not the other way around. You don't live to work. You work in order to finance your life, and your life is surrounded by your lifestyle, where you want to live, the kind of environment you want to have, the kinds of friends you want to have, the kind of hobbies you want to have. Do you want to be near your family, far away from your family, in the rural areas or the urban areas, mountains or seashore, or anywhere in between? Do you want to work 9 to 5? Do you want to work night shift? Do you want to work, 2 days on, 1 day off? Do you want to work, 7 days a week? Those are all career choices that are going to affect your lifestyle. And if you ignore your lifestyle needs, it'll be to your detriment because it's not sustainable. Again, you will burn out a lot faster in a job if you don't pay attention to your lifestyle. This is what people refer to as the work-life balance. Your life is what you're working to subsidize and to, finance, not the other way around. So if we take these three aspects, passion, talent, and lifestyle, where do we find that dream job? That dream job ideally exists somewhere in the overlap of passion, lifestyle, and talent. And it's not just in this little tiny center of the Venn diagram. Really, it could be anywhere in this overlap. So there's a lot of different options that could make you very happy. There's no single job that will make you happy to the exclusion of all others. There are many, many jobs that can bring you many different levels of happiness. And, what I encourage people to do is to look and see that, at this point in your life and your career and your, personal life journey, a different job might make you happier now than would later. That would later not fulfill you, but it might be really fulfilling right now, and vice versa. The other thing I want to emphasize is that your priorities will change over time. And that's right. That's normal and natural. They are not going to necessarily be this like super balanced Venn diagram. You know, your priorities might be where you have the blue is the passion. Your passion might be a really driving force in terms of what your career choices are, or your passion might just be, yeah, I kind of want to think about it, but yeah, it's not as important as my lifestyle. I want to be able to afford to live where I want to live, send my kids to school where I want to send them to school, drive the car that I want. Over here, maybe I'm willing to live with 5 roommates and, you know, take public transportation and not worry about having a car just yet. But I really care about my passion project because I want to save the world, or, you know, whatever your passion area is. So think about the fact that your priorities will change over time. And again, that is normal. It is natural. You just have to recognize where you might be at that particular time to figure out what job choices are going to make you the happiest at that particular time in your life. Any questions, Powell, before we move on to recruiters?
I think actually the questions we've gotten so far are more on the resume cover letter talking. So I think
okay, so we'll save them. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about kind of that theoretical part, the part about, you know, how you choose what path you want. So let's talk about more mechanics. Let's say you feel like you've already got your passion, you know, industry, that you are passionate about where you are already, but maybe you're not so passionate about the job that you're in. And you're like, how do I get a better position? Or how do I better position myself to enter the passion industry that I know I want, that I'm not yet in quite yet? You know, how do I get there? Well, the first thing I want to talk about, again, with those 2-part consumers, the first one being recruiters, let's talk about recruiters, because that's what I did for, you know, a couple of decades. And, you know, there's a love-hate relationship between candidates and recruiters. You know, people often refer to HR as a black hole because they feel like they send out hundreds of resumes and never get any answers back. I'm sure you guys can, you know, agree with that. And many of you might even have been in that position. I know I have been, where I put out a cover letter and a resume, and I feel like, oh, I just can't wait to hear back from them. And I never hear back. Well, it's not because the recruiters are your enemy. Believe me, recruiters are not your enemy. Okay. Recruiters have a job to do, but they are not your enemy. The fact of the matter is this, the second bullet under not your enemy, recruiters are measured by butt-in chair metrics. When we have vacancies, we get dinged. We don't want that. If I had a great candidate in front of me, why wouldn't I put them in that chair? Can you think of a reason why I wouldn't? I absolutely would, because remember, I get penalized for having empty vacancies for, you know, 10 weeks, 1 week, 5 weeks, 100 weeks. I mean, for some really specialized stuff in Lockheed Martin, I absolutely had vacancies for months, which I absolutely got dinged on, but it was because it was a super specialized kind of position. Or I might have entry-level accounting positions, which are, you would think, really easy to fill. Not always, but those could still be empty for, you know, 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks. And, you know, hiring managers are breathing down my neck. Clients are breathing down my neck. My manager is breathing down my neck. Remember, recruiters are not your enemy. If I could find a perfect candidate, or even just a really strong candidate, I shouldn't say perfect, there's no such thing as perfect, right? A really great matched candidate, I would absolutely extend an interview invitation immediately to that person. So bottom line is, give me, the recruiter, what I'm asking for, and I'll tell you how to know what I'm asking for, and I will give you a job offer. Okay. It is not a black hole of HR. My suggestion is, if you are putting out hundreds and hundreds of resume feelers, you are wasting your time and my time, because I had to sift through all of those resumes that are inappropriate candidates in order to find the hidden gems that are appropriate candidates. And you are spending hours and hours, and probably money, because time is money, to be on these job posting boards and putting out, you know, applications that you're not qualified for. And I'm going to show you in a few slides how to know if you're qualified for, and how to save your energy and really apply just for the jobs that you are qualified for, to make a recruiter happy and make a recruiter give you an interview invitation. Okay. So again, Recruiters hate generic resumes. They're really obviously blast resumes. They're generic to the point of, I don't know what to do with this resume. I can't put you in a pile of this, that, or the other job because it's so incredibly generic. Do not do that to yourself. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of my time. It prevents me from finding the candidates that actually will get job interview offers. Okay. So again, recruiters do not like blast resumes. Okay, so let's talk about those resumes. There are essentially two types of resumes, in my mind at least. A general resume, which is kind of that generic blast resume that I was referring to on the previous slide, and a response resume, which is what I'm going to focus on today. And what I think everybody should be doing is a response resume. Now, there is a place and a time for a general resume, a really generic, focused on your discipline, your job discipline or your industry, but kind of generic. Those examples would be a career fair where you don't know who you're going to meet. If you have a resume at all times in your backpack, in your briefcase, because you never know who you're going to run into at an airport or at a coffee shop or at a client site or whatever, yeah, have a generic resume. But if you even have 5, 10, 20 minutes to customize your resume prior to sending it to that person, do it, because that is the kind of resume that's going to get my attention. So I'm going to focus again on response resumes. Now, response means that there's a thing I am responding to. Now, that thing I am responding to is clearly the job posting. Also a little bit of company research, but primarily the job posting. Your resume should be a response to that job posting. Remember in that previous slide where I said, tell me, give me what I'm asking for? This is where I tell you what I'm asking for. Recruiters spend a lot of time. There's actually even a specialty within recruiting that is job description writing. Honest, there really is a specialty within HR that does that. But job description writing is really important for recruiters because it is essentially the document that says how we're going to do our job selections. And the Department of Labor actually, files a lot of these for affirmative action purposes to show that they are not discriminatory, that they are truly skills based, not thinly veiled discriminatory kinds of skills or requirements, and that ultimately the people that you actually hired do in fact meet these. Because when there are lawsuits for discrimination, those job descriptions go into the court papers as saying, here's what we asked for, here's who we actually interviewed, and here's who we actually selected. Those are really important documents. So HR people take those pretty seriously. So you should take them seriously because they're written very carefully. So let's say you've got a job description that you're very excited about. And you go, wow, I fit a lot of these criteria. Well, you need to show me those criteria on your resume really clearly, really well edited. Don't surround it with a whole lot of fluff. Don't put all this other stuff that you think is impressive, but isn't necessarily what I'm asking for. Save that for later. Save that for your interview. Save that for a discussion. Don't put it on the resume. Make the resume super focused, very edited, just the stuff I'm asking for. Because if I've got my job description list here and I've got your resume here and it's like a tick, 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 I'm going to be super excited and I'm going to send you an email or a phone call or a text or whatever and reach out to you right away and invite you in for an interview because you're like the thing I've asked for. Okay. Again, I'm not your enemy. I am trying to find the perfect candidate, but you've got to give me proof that you're the perfect candidate. And that is looking at my job description, sending me a resume that is a very close match to that job description. I can't tell you how many times I've seen resumes that you just kind of go, did you even read the job description? Do you even know who you're applying to? Because clearly they didn't. And again, it's a waste of your time and it's a waste of my time, and it prevents me from finding the right candidate for that job. Okay. Remember, it is about what the recruiter needs to see at this stage. They need to see examples of the job criteria that they've posted in your resume. The other major mistake I see people make at this stage is putting the stuff that they think is impressive, not what the recruiter needs to see to make this decision. Okay, don't make that mistake. If you went out and had an experience, again, remember, I'm mostly talking to undergraduate college students. If they, were a part of a group that, was like Engineers Without Borders, and they went to like South America and like built a clean water well for a whole village, that's amazing. That's wonderful. That's fantastic. I would love to hear more about it at a cocktail party, not necessarily on your resume, unless it's relevant to the job. For example, if you're applying to a job with like USAID or with an engineering company or a company that has something to do with water or clean filters or something like that, or camping, or something that has something relevant to do with building a clean water system for a village, yeah, include it. But if you're applying to PwC, if you're applying to Northrop Grumman, if you're applying to Under Armour, I don't really see the relevance of including that. Save it for an anecdote in your interview, which again, we will get to in a minute, but don't put it on your resume. It takes up space that should be used for something else. Okay. Again, Powell, drop in if there are any of the questions are pertinent to what I'm talking about.
I think you're covering them as you go. I'm seeing
awesome. Hey, great. Okay. All right. So again, people have a hard time dropping stuff off their resume because they've worked super hard at something or they're incredibly proud of something. My point is, for that single resume that you're submitting, omitting it, that thing off of one resume doesn't delete it from your history. It doesn't, mean you never include it ever. It just means you don't include it on today's resume. You're actually doing yourself a favor by editing your resume to being just the things that the recruiter needs to see today. Okay. All right. Let's talk about experience. This word is kind of an umbrella word, and we really need to break it down because I see it not misused, but misunderstood perhaps in the resume process. Experience means you've done something. That's all it means. It doesn't necessarily mean you're good at it. It doesn't necessarily tell me what you can do. Also, a lot of experience is situational. Okay, I'll say that again because it's important. A lot of experience is situational. You know how to do something in a particular situation, and maybe you can do that same thing in another similar situation. But if I pulled you into a third situation, which is not so similar, could you transfer the skill from that experience? Not necessarily. Okay. If you know how to flip burgers at McDonald's, can you flip burgers at Wendy's? Probably. But if you know how to manage the stock room at McDonald's, which is essentially supply chain management, meaning you know when to order things with enough lead time to be there just in time because you don't have that much shelf space, and you know the truck comes in on Tuesdays, and you know it's Memorial Day weekend, so you're going to sell a lot of ice cream, so you better have lots of napkins. That's supply chain management. Whether you're talking about McDonald's or you're talking about Under Armour, or you're talking about the Washington Capitals, supply chain is supply chain. If you can frame it that it's not about the experience, it's about the transferable skills that you gained at McDonald's that you can now transfer to the supply chain, supply requirements at the Washington Capitals organization, because you know about, inventory control, about, lead time, about planning, about transportation ordering, about invoices, about consumer, consumables, I'm just throwing words out there, but none of those words are specific to McDonald's. Those words are transferable skills. So when you are writing your resume, do your best to focus on your transferable skills, not about the specific experience that you had at that job situation. Because again, unless the situation that you're applying for is extremely similar, I've worked at McDonald's and I'm applying for a job at Wendy's, it's going to be a little bit harder for them to go, oh, well, I'm recruiting you for a job at Under Armour. I don't really see how McDonald's is relevant. Well, McDonald's may not be relevant, but your supply chain management skills are relevant. So again, extract, the skills from the experience, from the situation. And that's how you convince a recruiter from a completely different industry to maybe take a chance on you, because your transferable skills are not tied to McDonald's. They are skills that you now possess, you now own, and you can transfer and apply to another situation. Okay. I'll just keep going if there's no questions. Okay. So here's an example of that. I had a wonderful student once who had this really interesting experience, and he didn't know how to write it on his resume. You know those big white tents that you see? We see them a lot right now because of COVID, when people try to do things outdoors that normally would have been done indoors. Those big tents that you see at like weddings or barbecues or like Maryland Day, or those kinds of things. Those tents are really expensive. I don't know if you guys know this, but they're really expensive. And they take a lot of manpower to, one, set up, but also to take down, clean, refold, because they have to be done very carefully. And also, if you put them away wet, they'll get moldy, they'll get dirty, they're white, they need to be clean. All these things this student told me. Well, he was, part of this company that put up those tents. And it was really backbreaking labor to clean them, because they literally got down on their hands and knees in the parking lot on asphalt, scrubbing and hosing and soaping and drying with chamois and all these things, trying to get them to back into inventory so that they could rent them out again, because if it's not in inventory, they're not making any profit off of it. So he and I talked. You can see the slide that I have here. He and I talked about what he had done, and his concern was, if I write about a tent experience, kind of like I said McDonald's in the previous slide, he's like, nobody's going to hire me because they don't work with tents. How do I talk about the fact that I've got this skill that is not necessarily tied to tents? So going through it and talking to him at length about, what he knew how to do, what he had learned with the tent company, but now he knew how to do and he could transfer to a new situation. Here's what he and I came up with. These are the bullets that ended up on his slide, or excuse me, on his resume. I'll let you read those real quick. He was very proud about the fact that he had been able to improve some of the processes, in his own words, because he was lazy and didn't want to be on his hands and knees, scrubbing tents. And he figured out a couple of ways to do it a little bit more, more quickly. And ultimately that worked. And he was very proud of that. But again, he didn't want to tie it to tents. So if you look at the blue block, these are the bullets that ended up in his resume. It doesn't say anything about tents, right? This is where generic is in your favor. Earlier, I said recruiters hate generic resumes. That's not what this means. What this means is that he did not talk about tents. He did not talk about vinyl or delivery or setup. He talked about the skills in a generic, in a positive way, generic sense that is still in the language of business. That anybody, whether you are a recruiter for Under Armour, and I'm just picking on companies, Under Armour, or for Northrop Grumman, or for, Aldi's grocery store, can look at these bullets and go, oh yeah, I would love to talk to a person who does this. He scrubbed it of the industry specific terms so that it became generic enough that any business person could read that and go, yeah, I like that skill. They could see themselves in that, and they could see this student, this candidate, in their workplace already. So again, generic isn't a bad word. It's just when you use it. Okay. Powell, any resume questions before I move on to cover letters?
Yeah, we have a couple kind of technical questions regarding resume.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one person was asking if you had any templates or examples that you maybe use or prefer.
I tend to go with the Smith School template,
Okay.
which, it's on Hiresmith. I'm not sure if alumni still have access to that or not, but it's a very straightforward. It's not some mysterious template. My suggestion is that there are essentially two types of resumes in terms of templates. There's the chronological resume, which literally lists where I've worked, most recent first, then the last, and then the last and the last.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a skills type resume, which clusters things by the skill, and then just has like a employment history, chronologically later on. They both have different purposes. They're both useful. There are lots of templates out there on the web. I hate to say it, but Google it. There's a lot. Yeah, I don't really have a specific favorite.
Awesome. And another question that came in on resumes was, do you think that the 1-page resume rule is outdated? Is it okay to go over that limit, or should you keep it to 1 page?
I can see where it's outdated in the practicality of we don't really work with paper that much anymore, right? However, I, as a recruiter still, and OCS at Smith still, highly recommends, if not requires for my class, that you keep to a 1-page resume, because if you cannot distill your skill set to a single page for the recruiter, again, you're just including way, way too much. Also, recruiters spend, and I've talked to other recruiters and compared these numbers, and from my experience, they're pretty true. Good recruiters, meaning experienced recruiters, will spend about not even 8 to 10 seconds on your resume at first look. 8 to 10 seconds. That sounds like nothing. But honestly, for a recruiter who's very experienced and has a stack of like 300 resumes after an event, that's fine. I can spend 8 to 10 seconds on a resume and put you in a yes, no, or maybe pile. And if you go into the maybe or the no pile, I probably won't ever touch your resume again. And I will get everything I need from my yeses pile, because there's that many candidates. And also it's pretty clear really quick which resumes meet my minimum requirements, again, based on my job description. So my answer is, I do see where a 1-page resume might be obsolete from a electronics versus paper perspective. But again, considering the recipient, considering the reader, for a recruiter, yes, please keep to a 1-page resume. You're doing yourself a favor, because if I received a 5-page resume, I'm not sure I would even look at it past the first page.
Right.
I really don't think I would, because if you can't distill your skills to 1 page, I'm not sure I want to look at the rest of it.
That makes sense. Going to, you actually getting the resume in the recruiter's hand. A couple people have brought up some questions regarding like the automated programs or bots that are used to either review resumes or before they even get into, the actual human recruiter's hands. Do you have any advice about that? Or
yeah, depending upon the size of the company, and even smaller companies sometimes, utilize these. There are resume bank systems, companies or apps or whatever that will allow you to pre-screen. I think that's what you mean by bots. Is that right?
I think so.
Okay, so they're basically pre-screening things. They're looking for keywords.
Okay.
They're looking for keywords. They're looking for specific schools, specific degrees, years of the degree granted, geographic preferences. They're looking for specific zip codes. I can screen, depending upon the robustness of that program, I can screen for a lot of different things, or I can, open my aperture really wide and say, I'm looking nationwide. Remember I mentioned that like really specific skill type of position, that really advanced position. I would open it up nationwide or sometimes worldwide, for a really, really specific, or excuse me, a really, really hard to find skill. But if I'm looking for a very easy to find skill, like marketing majors or real estate agents or finance, or whatever it is I'm looking for that I've got lots of, I might focus it in on like a lot of really close criteria, because there's so many candidates in there. So keep that in mind. Those programs are often, again, looking for keywords. So that's a situation where you might want to do a very generic resume that includes kind of everything. But again, you kind of still need to keep it to 1 page. So be, again, thoughtful about that. If it's a person, however, reading your resume, you want to make it very, very focused on the job at hand. So part of it's knowing where your resume is going. Is it just kind of a general data bank? Or is it going to a specific job description, meaning tagged to a specific job description, so that the recruiter for that job description is going to receive all the tagged, applicants? I can both I can both view resumes that are direct applicants and then also do searches on my own. And I typically am doing both because there are, again, passive candidates who are sitting in my database that are a great match, but for whatever reason has not seen my job description. Or they applied last summer when they were looking and they're not looking anymore, but they're still a really strong candidate. That's the passive candidate that I'm going to go out and reach out to and say, hey, I came across your resume. Don't know if you're looking. Here's the job description. If you're interested, drop me a line, that kind of thing.
Okay. And I think one last question about kind of the mechanics of a resume. Is there a minimum font size that should be being used? I know especially
that's a great question. My suggestion is no smaller than about an 11 or 12 point font size.
Okay.
And here's why. Computers are dumb. They're very fast, they're very accurate, but they're dumb. If you put something in front of them that they can't read, they're going to freak out and like spit it back out. If it's something that they can read really easily, they will, the optical character recognition, and they will put it into all the boxes. Many resumes are scanned, or they're, uploaded as, text, they're translated to text, like pure text. So if you give, a computer something they can't read, the font is really curly, or it's kind of dark, or it's got kind of like fancy italics and all these other things in there. You might do yourself a disservice by having the computer misread it and therefore misclassify you. The second reason is once it's in front of a human, as usually like a screen, it'll be like I can look at often as a text translation and then also like a scan of the actual paper resume or the PDF resume. So I can see all your pretty formatting and all that stuff. If it's too small and, I wear reading glasses, many recruiters are going to be a little bit older. A lot of hiring managers are going to be a little bit older. If it's really hard for me to read, I'm just going to put it to the side and I'm going to pick up the resume that's easy to read. So again, you put yourself in a disservice in a negative place if you make it so small text, because you're trying to cram so much stuff in there. That's why people do that. Again, edit, remove stuff that's not relevant. I guarantee you'll find space. White space is a good thing.
Okay, that kind of covered another question we got. I think we can go into cover letters, and if there's more at the end, we can kind of touch back to some of this.
Okay, very good. Okay, so cover letters. There are a couple of different types of correspondence. If you kind of get cover letters, down pat, you'll be able to do all these other ones as well. Business letters are still a thing, even though they might be transmitted by email versus transmitted by USPS with a stamp and an envelope. It's still best practice to do a business style letter. It's more formal. It is more professional. It feels more mature. It shows me, especially again, because I'm talking mostly to college students, undergrads. It shows me that you have a level of maturity and professionalism that I guarantee you many of your peers don't yet have. It's one of those differentiators. It, again, is just one of those, this is how you operate in a business world, okay? Business letter, again, it's not a mystery. Google it. There's lots of great examples out there. Now let's talk about cover letters, why we do them. They're not just to make you do another hoop. They're actually to tell me, the recruiter and or the hiring manager, something extra about you. It's an introduction, and it's something to tell me about why you think you're a great fit for this job. You're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be the best. I'm not looking for the highest qualified person, because honestly, I'm not sure I can keep that person engaged. I'm looking for the best fit, meaning you are at the right place in your career for my job opportunity. There's growth, there's training, there's opportunity, there's, satisfaction and competency. If I'm looking for like the highest level person, like a PhD or something for an entry level accounting job, one, I can't pay them what they probably need. And two, they're going to be so bored, they're going to walk out in 3 months. Okay. I'm not looking for the highest level. I'm looking for the right level. So keep that in mind as well. I'm looking for the best fit for my position right now. What you want to use the cover letter for is to highlight things that aren't otherwise in your resume. Please, for the love of Mike, please do not regurgitate your resume. Do not regurgitate your resume. It's a waste of your time and a waste of my time. Do not put bullets in your cover letter. It should be narrative. and it should be 100% tailored to the job. Again, I can smell a generic vanilla resume a mile away, and it annoys me because it wastes my time. It also shows me that you don't care about your application. And I'm not sure that's a good look. Because if you're telling me that you can't be bothered to tailor your cover letter and your resume, I'm going to give you that same level of attention, which is nothing. Okay. But if you show me that you've really tailored your resume and really tailored your cover letter, I'm going to take the time to read the whole thing. And I'm going to take the time to really consider you as a candidate. Okay. So again, please do not regurgitate your resume. Your resume is just fact. It is black and white, has already happened in the past, fact. Do not put future stuff on resumes. Anything hypothetical on a resume. Resume is from today backwards. Future plans like, oh, I will be sitting for my CPA exam in April. That doesn't go in your resume because you don't have a CPA yet. You will be sitting for it in April. That goes in your cover letter to tell me about a future plan. Or I'm interested in, pursuing my MBA within the next 2 or 3 years. Again, cover letter, not resume. Cover letters are the context for me to understand who you are, where you might be in your career, and again, why you think you're a great fit for my position, not for you to regurgitate your resume. I will read your resume, but your cover letter should be something extra. Anything else on cover letters?
I think just going through there. And would you say that cover letters are, important through all industries, or there's some industries you think it's more important to or less important in?
I don't actually think cover letters are really required in all situations.
Okay.
If I did not have that extra thing to say, I probably wouldn't include a cover letter personally. But if I do have something extra to say, so for example, if I'm re-entering the workforce after maybe taking some years off to raise a small child, or to for me, help my elderly parents, transition, or a medical situation, or maybe you relocated for your spouse's job, and so there's a gap in your employment. Those kinds of things are very well explained in a cover letter because there's no way to really explain it otherwise on your resume. So really not every situation and not every industry cares about cover letters. I think it's when you have something extra to say.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's one other, I think you kind of touched on it, discussing, if you had a long gap or anything in, it's been a while since you've been in the workforce, or a gap in employment. A little bit goes back to your resume, but is there a certain time frame at which you stop including something? For example, somebody in the chat had asked, would you list relevant experience from 18 years ago?
Oh, great question. My answer is yes, if it's relevant.
Okay.
I know it's 18 years ago, but kind of like riding a bike, I'd rather have somebody who had some experience with it 18 years ago than someone who's never, ever, ever done whatever the thing is that I need them to do. Because I can retrain somebody, even though technology has probably changed quite a bit in those 18 years, some of the core understanding might still be, very relevant. So yeah, I think relevance is always to be included. If it's 18 years ago and you don't really want to put it on your resume, maybe mention that in the cover letter, and acknowledge, I know that this was 18 years ago, but I did have, 3 years in this industry, prior to taking some time off to, care for my child or care for my, elderly parent, or move cross country or pursue a degree or whatever it is. Again, that kind of stuff can go in your resume.
Okay, great. I think we can keep going, and we have some other stuff that's a little, sporadic that we'll come back to.
Okay. Oh, one of the pre-questions that was asked, Powell, that you shared with me, someone had asked about having moving around, they had been their company had been sold and acquired, and they had changed some things, but they had still been doing the same job, but they're their title had changed, their office had changed. And then someone else mentioned that also they had kind of been doing something for 18 years, but they kept moving positions, but had kind of been doing the same job for those 18 years. I would answer both of those questions in the same way. I mentioned earlier that there's 2 general categories of resumes. One is a chronological resume, which I think most of us are, familiar with, where you list this employer, here's what I did. This employer, here's what I did. this employer, here's what I did.
Mhm.
The other style, which most people are not familiar with, is more of a skills organized resume, where you would organize it by, here's the skill I know, no dates or anything like that. Just here are the skills I know. Here's examples of how I can demonstrate those skills. Here's the second, skill I know. Here's the examples of how I demonstrate those skills, or like major achievements, things like that. Maybe third skill, maybe just two, maybe third. And then below that would be employment. Basically, it's your employment history, where you would say, I worked for so-and-so from this date to this date in this office. Here was my title. I worked for this person from this date to this date. Here was my title. So what it does is it separates the skills from the employment where you acquired it. And it just gives it, not with dates, but just basically saying, I know how to do this. I'm a subject matter expert in blah, 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 blah. And that's a good way of, quantifying your skills and not necessarily tying those skills to a particular employer for that time period. Does that make sense?
Definitely. I think
So again, if you look up skills style resume versus chronological resumes, there's going to be a lot of examples out there for that.
Okay, great. And I think I misspoke earlier, but we are getting a lot of requests for the slide deck. If you would send it
Okay.
after, I'll get it.
I will leave that to you. I will forward it to you,
Perfect.
Kyle,
I'll
and
get
then
it
you
sent out.
can arrange how that's happening. Okay. All right. Okay. And then last thing is acing the interview. Quick time, it's 6:29. Are we okay time-wise?
Yeah,
Kyle?
we're here. We're good
Okay.
till 7, and I think we're kind of interspersing some of the questions. So
Excellent. Okay. So let's talk about acing the interview. Earlier, the resume is really going to be focused more at the recruiter, right? You got to put yourself in the headspace of the recruiter. Make sure the recruiter is someone that you are, not someone, because you don't know who they are necessarily, that you are thinking like a recruiter. What do they want to see? What do they care about? What do they not care about? Okay. Think about that when you're doing the resume. Now for the interview, you often want to think more like the hiring manager. What is the hiring manager going to want to hear? What are they going to care about? Now your interviewer, depending upon your situation, may not necessarily be the hiring manager. There might be a panel, there might be a team, especially again at undergraduate level, it's often a team of people who might be technical experts or something, but not necessarily the hiring manager for the open position. So try and find out, if you can, who you're being interviewed by ahead of time. That will allow you to prepare a little bit differently. Okay.
and how would you go about finding, just emailing directly to who you've been corresponding to ask?
I would just ask the recruiter who's setting up your resume or setting up your interview, just, very gently, I was wondering if I could know who I'm going to be meeting at my interview. I just want to prepare.
Mhm.
Who's going to say no to that?
Right.
And it's not like some secret. They might say, oh, I'm not exactly sure yet. But if they know, and hopefully they know, they'll be able to tell you, you'll be interviewing with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. There are 5 core competencies that you want to demonstrate in the interview. These are not Lockheed Martin specific. These are not Smith specific. These are really universal. Okay. These are really, really universal. And this is something I actually challenge my classes with, is to bring me a interview question that does not fall into one of these 5 core competencies. And I have not yet had them do that. And there are whole books and websites of just example interview questions. And so there are hundreds of examples out there for you to peruse. They all generally fall into one of these core competency areas. So the biggest question I get from a student is, how am I supposed to prepare when I don't know what they're going to ask me? And the answer is, they're going to ask you questions that are going to fall into one of these 5 core competency areas. So if you can prepare answers for these 5 competency areas, you will be able to kind of segue your answer into, one of these questions that you've prepared to answer their question. Okay, so let's look at an example of this. Okay, so I refer to it in my class as 5 big examples. The reason I say 5, just 5, is because 5 just seems like a good number to have for about a 30 to 45 minute interview, which is typically what they end up being. Minimum of 3. If you only have like one example that you use for the different things, even though it may have been a major project or something you're really proud of, or something that you were very in depth for multiple years, it makes you feel like, or it makes the recruiter or the person you're interviewing with feel like you've only got one experience. You really want to show a variety of experiences overlapping, meaning that multiple examples of the same competency gives me confidence that you really are that person. You're that, really collaborative team member, because you've got lots of examples of that. And it makes me very confident that, wow, they really are that kind of a person. It wasn't just a one-off. Okay. So you want to have multiple examples of every competency. And I'll show you that chart in just a second. Okay. Okay. Again, this was that tense example. Whoops. Yes. Okay. So this was that tense example. We use that in the class as well. Okay. So here's the 5 big examples. So this is just a very simple chart. It's an exercise I do with all of my students. It's an exercise you all can do as well prior to an interview. It would change with every interview. You don't just do it once and you're done. Again, it's very much focused on what that job description tells me they care about. Okay, so remember, it's focused and customized for that job description. And people sometimes push back and say, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work customizing cover letters and resumes. And how am I going to find a job, if I have to customize all this stuff? And my answer is this: you're not putting out 100 resumes customized. That's ridiculous. Okay. You're putting out 3. You're putting out 5, maybe 10 at the most. But are you really going to find 10 job descriptions that you're equally super excited about? Probably not. You're probably going to find 1 that you're super excited about, and maybe 2 or 3 that you're kind of excited about. Focus your energy on those. Focus your energy on those. Again, if you give me, the recruiter, the courtesy of a really elegantly written, focused, edited, customized cover letter and resume, I will probably give you, the candidate, the same amount of attention back. That is your best chance for catching my eye, is something that's very, very relevant, very, very customized. So again, I'm not asking you to do this for 100 resumes. I'm asking you to do this for like 3. And I think everybody can probably do that. And that's what's going to raise your chances of being noticed. And you can follow up with 3 recruiters if they just, for whatever reason, your email got buried or your application got buried. You can follow up with like 3 recruiters. Can't really follow up with 100. So again, focus your energy, use your energy in the job search wisely. Again, it's the people who blast email their resume or blast apply their resume, and it's a vanilla resume, that I think spin their wheels and just get nowhere. Okay. So in this 5 big examples, you're going to put like job 1, job 2. Again, remember, I'm using usually with undergrads, a class project, a club, a volunteer situation. These are all still things you can use as an experienced professional. You might have a volunteer organization that you're a part of, or a club that you're a part of, that might have, given you some really great examples of communication skills, or of mediation skills, or, collaboration, or entrepreneurial skills, whatever it is. Don't feel like it has to be job oriented. There are many other aspects of your life that might have great examples. Even personal situations. I've had students talk to me about maybe having like a sibling who might have some special needs, and some of the skills they developed from being in a family, really great organizational skills, or really strong communication skills. Great, use those, because that's a part of who they are now. And they absolutely have, transferable skills now from that situation. How you obtain that skill is not as important as the transferable skill you have. Okay. So the example here is that if you look at the horizontal rows, the vertical columns don't matter, the horizontal rows. If you look at initiative leadership, I've got 2 examples under job number 1 and under my club. And I'm just going to jot down examples of what I did that qualify as initiative and leadership. Problem solving, I've got 1 example under class project. Communication, I've got 3 examples. Adaptability, flexibility, I've got 0 examples. And under teamwork, I've got 2 examples. Okay. I want at least 3 in every horizontal row. So communication is good. I could make more, but I'm okay with that. For initiative and leadership, I should really come up with another one. So maybe, whoops, sorry, I lost my slide. So maybe I can come up with example number 6 just for initiative leadership. And I need to come up with a couple, at least 2 or 3 examples just for adaptability, flexibility. Okay. So if you can fill out this chart, and this chart can be plenty long, don't write narrative blocks, just write bullet points to remind you of the situation. And then, if you've got these written out and you remember in detail what each of those examples are, and you kind of have this document and you use this to refresh yourself before walking into an interview, you will be able to give examples that, meet these 5 core competency areas. So any question I throw at you, you will probably be able to pick and choose one of these examples that you prepared and answer it really, really well. And again, because you made sure that you had at least 2 or 3 examples for every horizontal row, if I ask you for a secondary example, you'll have one. Now, the reason I say don't write a narrative paragraph, rather do little bullets or just key phrases or sentences, is because people tend, when they're nervous, to recite things or memorize and recite. And you don't want to do that because it'll come across like you're reciting Shakespeare. But if you've got just bullet points, it'll just make you remember, and then you'll speak in a more natural tone and a more natural, memory, retrieval way. It'll come across as more authentic. It'll come across as more genuine, and it'll be truly your memory that you're just sharing with them. The worst part is when you walk out of an interview and you go, oh, I should have told them about this. Well, if you plan this, chart, if you prepare this chart, hopefully that won't happen because you will have prepared your best examples by going back and looking through your resumes, going back and looking through old applications, all of those things to allow you to pull up the best examples. Okay. That's it, Powell. Any other questions that I can answer?
Thank you so much for your presentation. First of all, that was excellent. I have so many comments in here, just asking for the slide deck.
I hope it's what people were expecting.
We have a lot of positive commentary in here. We do have some questions that are kind of, on different topics that I'm gonna start with, and everyone can please feel free to continue to add any others.
Please.
So we had a couple questions going back to some of the initial conversation you were having about passion. So first, somebody had asked, are there any resources that can help identify your own passion or professional passions?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm not aware of any, but there are some areas like, again, for example, in the Smith School, we use, for the undergraduates, we use a tool called Clifton Strengths, which is kind of like an inventory tool, an online question answer tool, like, would you rather this or this? Would you rather this or this? It's a little bit like Myers-Briggs, but for career path kinds of things. Again, it's called Clifton Strengths. I don't know if it's available to alumni. Maybe it is, I don't know, but that's what I know, one of the tools we use to help students kind of home in on what their, best strengths are and what industries might match that. Really, are you excited about it? Are you interested in it? Does your ears perk up when you hear stories about something? What is not effort? What does it not take effort to follow? Like, one area that I have like no interest in is cars. Like, I put gas in, I might take it for an oil change. I could care less about cars. My husband loves cars. He can glance at a car on the Beltway and tell me like what year it is, how many cylinders it has, what their history is, blah, 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 blah. Okay. I have no interest in that area. I would be very hard pressed to work in that industry because I just have no interest. Now, there are areas of mine where I can glance at something, like I'm a knitter. I can glance at like a sweater and do the same thing my husband did for cars and go, oh, that's a, that's a set-in seam Gansey style Fair Isle pullover with a crew neck and a 3/4 zip. And my husband's going to go, what? So find the area that you're just super into and see if there's a job area that's even somehow tertiarily related to it. And again, those are the jobs that you feel like, I can't believe people pay me for this, that kind of thing. And that's what I would hope for everyone, is to find a passion area that they're really amazingly glad to be paid to be in, because they would be in it even if it was unpaid.
that makes a lot of sense. I will also, going back to, for some specific resources, I will see what's available through the Alumni Association and include any links or any of those when I send out the slide deck and the link to the
Oh, that's a great idea.
presentation as well. And I know some
Great
people
idea.
are sharing some different links in the chat. That's awesome.
Oh, awesome.
We also got, on a kind of different side, we got some questions regarding follow-up after an interview, and follow-up after a rejection to an interview, and maybe what to do if you just, if you're not hearing anything back, or if you've heard a negative response.
Okay. Follow up after an interview or any kind of like actual interaction, at the very minimum, it can be an emailed thank you note. I think paper thank you notes are more memorable. Again, it differentiates you from your peers because most people will just send that email and be done.
Mhm.
But if you go the extra step to actually do a handwritten, even just note card, not necessarily a big old letter. It can just be those nice little note cards, like a little one with like your initials or a Maryland one or whatever.
Mhm.
It's just that extra step, it's just that nicety. It's that kind of politeness, business, polish. Following up after a rejection is, again, it's an opportunity for you to show your maturity. Thank you for your time. It was still really great to meet you. If there's anything that comes up in the future, because you don't know, you might have been like barely the second candidate, and that, maturity that you show might actually tip the scale for the next opening. And they might say, you know what, we don't even have to post the next one because we have a candidate from last round that I really liked, but we just didn't have a slot for her. I think I want to reach out to her. And, don't burn those bridges. Don't be like, you missed out, you suck, all that. It's more of a thank you for your time. Appreciate it. If you learn of any other opportunities, I'm still very excited about your, industry, your company, very impressed, whatever the truth is.
Mhm.
And, you can always follow up with people because jobs are cyclical.
Mhm.
Even though, keeping top of mind in a positive way with your recruiters is almost never going to hurt you. It could really help you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. A couple questions regarding, kind of the changes in resume writing and interviewing. So kind of two
Okay.
parts. One, are there any trends that you're seeing in current resumes that are either something to move forward to or something that's kind of trendy and off-putting maybe? I'll start with that one.
Okay. I have seen a lot of resumes that are slightly different format, meaning like their name is like sideways up the side, or there's like some interesting graphics, or they're like on colored backgrounds. These are electronic, not even
Right.
back in the day, they'd be on like really pretty paper or something like that. But these are electronic paper documents. I understand why people want to do that. Again, it's differentiate yourself. However, think you have to consider the recipient again. Always consider the recipient. If you are applying for a creative field, art, graphic arts, fine arts, fashion, advertising, web work, that might be, very, very visual, the visual arts. Yeah, something like that might really go over really well. It's creative, it's still professional, it's polished, it's really graphic, it grabs you. But if you're applying for a very kind of conservative, for lack of a better word, industry, if you're applying to manufacturing, if you're applying to the defense, contracting industry like Lockheed Martin, if you're applying to the government, to the Army, to one of the big four accounting firms, I don't know the creativity is necessarily the thing you want to demonstrate in that case. When it comes to accounting, we don't want a lot of creative accountants. We want a very, right? You want a very, detailed, follows the guidelines, knows the regulations, right? Creative accounting is usually a bad thing. So again, think about the recipient. I do see some of the more graphic stuff. Again, if it's a creative industry, I think that's fine. But if it's not a creative industry, I think you might be, again, presenting yourself in a way that I'm not sure is going to help you.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Going on with, newer trends and how we're dealing with things in 2020.
Mhm.
2022. Um, I don't,
Feels like 2020, right?
I can't believe it. Yeah. Do you have any tips for virtual interviews with that becoming more of a trend?
Pile, make a note, remind me, I'm going to send you a link to a YouTube
Mhm.
tutorial about how to present yourself on Zoom,
Oh,
because
perfect.
it's a really good YouTube. She's a photographer,
Okay.
so she does it from like very much a photography side, and I really liked what she said. So remind me to send you that link.
Yeah, I'm making notes.
But so you always will get that,
Mhm.
but generally set up a Zoom and think about how you look on that Zoom. For example, I've got a cereal box underneath my laptop right now to raise my laptop up so that it's eye level with me. How many Zooms have you seen with somebody like going, hey, how you doing? What's up? Because their laptops are like down on their laps, it's a laptop, or on their coffee table. And it's like looking up at them. And then you go, this thing happening, hair's falling down, you're looking at your ceiling fan and the fan's going like this. If I
Mhm.
can see your ceiling, that's not good. Okay, so basic, and again, the YouTube link I send you is going to show you all the lighting tricks, the background tips, all that stuff. So it's a pretty good example of it. But I actually spent the time with my students when we were on Zoom, like picking people every class and doing a Zoom review. How does their Zoom presence look? Do they look professional? Can I see their faces? What's their background look like? What's the lighting look like? You know, um, what's the sound, the noise in the background, all of that. And so, that is definitely something to think about. How are you presenting yourself? Normally we would say, oh, how are you groomed and what's your shoes and what's your suit going to an in-person thing? Well, if you're in Zoom, whether it's the workplace or an interview, you got to think about how you're presenting yourself, right? How you're setting up your webcam, what's the lighting situation where you are, all of that. So I think that is something that, many of us I'd never heard of Zoom before March 2020.
Mhm.
And, usually group, meetings would be a telecon. Now everything was on video. And so you had to worry about all the video stuff. So you have to, adjust to those things. Interviews are very often going to be over Zoom because one is the pandemic, which again is not over. Two is it also allows, and we were already moving this way before the pandemic hit, it allows you to interview with people who are not anywhere near you geographically.
Mhm.
And it's very efficient from the employer's perspective because I don't have to drive to campus and spend an hour getting there, park, pay for parking, find the room, and then drive an hour back in Beltway traffic. I can just log in, do it for 30 minutes and log back out and get back to work. So companies really like it for that reason, at least at the first stages. Second, third interviews will often be in person on site. So don't be afraid of that, or clarify with your recruiter, how that's going to go, because different companies are going to handle it differently. If I'm interviewing you for a virtual position, you might never come into my site. But if I'm interviewing you for an ultimately in-person position, Zoom might just be the first, step. Or I might want you to come in person right off the bat. So make sure you clarify that with whoever's scheduling your interview.
Awesome. A couple questions about this. Are there any tips that you have regarding maybe people who are, due to the pandemic, changing careers after a long while or getting back into the workforce after a long while?
Yeah, the great resignation, right? I think that it's honestly not that, from my perspective, not that much different. People change jobs all the time.
Mhm.
It's just the volume, right? It's just the volume. So you are going to be perhaps in a little bit higher volume of competition at one time than you may have been just on a normal day pre-pandemic. And so it's something, again, that I think the things I've talked about today are even more important.
Mhm.
They're always important, I believe, but even more important to distinguish and differentiate yourself from the masses of people who are, also applying for jobs, or from the passive workforce, from the passive candidate pool that, again, are not looking for jobs, but I, the recruiter, am so short staffed that I'm out searching for people. So it's really just the candidate pool is bigger now, but I think the processes, the mechanics, all of that are pretty similar to, a non-pandemic time.
We had a question a little bit earlier regarding, I guess it goes also into the mechanics of a resume, but about how to either should you be including, disincluding, or where the line is regarding age in the interview process and resume process. Is there a certain point at which, I think the question specifically it asked, is there a certain point at which you should take off the year that you graduated?
Oh, for concern about like age discrimination?
I think so. And I think somebody else had mentioned too, regarding major career changes, just with, how this factors in for alumni, maybe who are 50 plus.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Yes and no. And here's why. Again, thinking like a recruiter, right?
Mhm.
Your high school, even for college graduates, should not be on your resume because it's probably not pertinent. Even if you're not a college graduate,
Mhm.
it's probably not pertinent because you're probably so far, what's more pertinent are things like certifications, degrees, other kinds of experience. However, college degrees, depending upon the field, the year in which you got it actually makes a difference from a recruiting perspective. A computer science degree from 1975 and a computer science degree from 2005 are two very different things.
Mhm.
Okay. So college degrees, I would say still keep your graduation year on there because again, your degree, the year in which it was granted, gives me an indication of the kind of education that degree represents.
Mhm.
On the other hand, if your degree was from quite a long time ago, you've probably got other certifications and other continuing education and other kinds of things that show that you've kept up with it, I hope. That the dates on those being more recent are really what's going to matter more to me. So maybe your degree was in 1971. I'm not going to hold that against you as long as your current certifications are from like the last 5 or 10 years. I do understand the concerns for age discrimination. Hopefully you all know that that is illegal, but I do understand that there might be some concern for that. But you can't really get around some of those dates because you've got to include dates on resumes to show me that you were there from this time to this time. Those dates of employment are going to kind of, if I wanted to do the math, I'm going to figure out how old you are. But in my experience, I'm not going to sit there and figure out how old you are. I'm going to look for look for what kinds of skills and technical knowledge you have. I can't remember ever, honestly, in the couple decades I've been in this kind of role, I've never had a manager or a recruiter calculate someone's age and go, oh no, we're not going to interview that person. That person's, probably close to retirement. And I don't want to bring on a new person who's close to retirement. I've never heard someone say anything like that, honestly. Maybe I've been fortunate to be in good locations. But honestly, people with more experience are usually better employees. They're a known quantity, honestly.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me. We also just had a question regarding after we get through recruiting and the interview, if you're offered a job, do you have any tips and suggestions on salary negotiations?
Oh, I did not include any of that in today's thing because I was just keeping it on the resume side. That's a whole nother topic.
Okay.
I'm happy to reschedule that with you if you want. Managing, negotiating offers is a whole nother topic. So I'm afraid I can't really get into that. I will start with just total compensation is the first thing, is understanding that your compensation by a company is more than just your salary. So if you can't budge on salary, which some companies can or can't, I negotiate the other things around that: parking, training, class reimbursement, paying for certifications or paying for memberships. A lot of different industries have certifications or memberships in like the professional organizations. Those are hundreds of dollars. Maybe you can negotiate that. More time off, those kinds of things. I would be happy to do that as another topic, but that is a big topic.
Gotcha. Perfect. And we will have to reschedule that then, because
yeah.
And I think we have 2 last quick questions, both kind of about mechanics of a resume again.
Mhm.
One is, about finding lingo for like newly developing fields, and knowing which lingo is professional or appropriate. For example, I think inventory management is kind of an old, well-known term in a long-standing field, but what about new subfields in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Ooh, interesting. I would just say read professional articles about the topic. Make sure they're from credible sources. There are many sources out there that are in professional journals, in credible news sources, in Wall Street Journal, those kinds of things. Or like, for example, for Lockheed Martin, if I was advising somebody who was interested in like the aviation field, I would tell them to look at, some of the more, field specific journals like Jane's Aviation, or, those kinds of things. There are whole journals and sections of newspapers that follow the defense field. Again, if I was advising someone in that area, if you're looking at IT, if you're looking at real estate, if you're looking at marketing, like social media marketing, electronic marketing, which is, still kind of emerging, look to find articles written about those topics, find, experts in those fields, and look for like journalist, academic papers and things like that. The terminology and the lingo will be there, and looking at the dates of those articles will help you see which ones are more, archaic maybe, and which ones are more current and modern.
That's really great advice. I think that's about all the time we have for this evening. Thank you so much, Susan, for your time and your expertise. Like I'd mentioned, a recording of this webinar will be sent to all of you. In that, I will also include the link that Susan had mentioned regarding the YouTube for the virtual interviewing, as well as try to find some, Myers-Briggs types or whatever the Alumni Association may have in terms of like inventorying skills and passions. Thank you guys all for joining us today. We really hope to see you guys at another event during Career Week and another Howard County Terps alumni event. Have a wonderful evening, stay healthy, and go Terps.
Yay, go Terps. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much, Susan. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.